Hey everyone, and welcome to Sports Break. I am super excited to be joined today by Kate Delhagen. She is the founder of Oregon Sports Angels. Kate, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
No problem. It's my pleasure, Ashley.
Yeah, I'd love for you to tell folks who you are, what you're known for, kind of just in your professional career, what you've been up to.
Okay. Well, in this context of She Plays podcast, I would say I think I started playing right out of the crib, and I never stopped playing sports. So my pretty much my whole life has I've been an active athlete my whole life. So that's kind of point one. I think probably a lot of your community shares that interest in that activity. My parents were both active. My mom was a snow sports person, taught us skiing, ice skating. She also taught us swimming. My dad was a track and field guy. And when I was 8 years old, we were living in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and my dad actually took me to a track meet with my sister. And he said, "You girls are going to run in this little AAU track meet, get busy." And I did 4 events that day and did well. And I was in the little 9 and unders, but I was a little tomboy, and I threw the ball and I jumped over a bar and I landed in a sawdust pit, and I loved it. And said, "When can we go back?" And of course, my sister, who's a totally different human, she's like, "I'm not going back. I want to do tap and ballet." So I went back and I became a track and field kid. I fell in love with a high jump, and I only going this long on this particular story because it was a very seminal event. When I look back on my career and I go, "Wow, that was amazing." I was at an AAU championship in Pittsburgh in '71, and the honorary chairman of the event, the sort of the luminary walked into the stadium, and we were out in the field jumping and running. And I heard the crowd erupt in applause, and someone saying over the loudspeaker, "Welcome Jesse Owens to be our, MC for the day." And of course, I'm a kid. I don't like whatever. I know he's somebody important, but I had no context. Well, of course, as I got older, I grew to really appreciate what he did for sports and what he represents still to me, and especially to track and field athletes. So anyway, Jesse was awesome. And he went around the track and he signed all of our t-shirts. He signed our programs. I still to this day have his signature. And the reason I continue to tell this story is because I try and channel him. I learned as I studied his life, he almost always signed his autographs in the same way. And the message was almost always this: "My best always, Jesse Owens." And I was like, wow, what an ambition to try to live up to, right? Like, just try and give your best always. So anyway, I keep that autograph. It sort of tells a little story, but it also is a really interesting point in my life. I'm not a big fan of meeting famous people, but that made such an impact on me, and it continues to guide my worldview. Anyway, fast forward from there, I played basketball, track and field, high school, college. Enjoyed both. The real interesting value was track and field as sort of individuals roll up to a team score. You kind of live or die on your performance other than the relay. I was multi-sport. I did heptathlon. Oh God, that's a whole story, um, which we can get into. But basketball is a total team sport. So two totally different vibes of
Yeah.
being involved in sports at a high level. And I love them both. And I think they taught me very different, the foundation of sports and showing up for practice and learning how to train and compete, be a good teammate and listen to a coach, like all of those things across both. But the individual contributor part of a team, the true team player as part of a team, and even on the bench as a supporting cast, and eventually, mentoring or teaching younger players or younger athletes a coach role. It was great. And that sort of brought me out of, college graduation. And of course, as we all know, it's a little harder to play at any kind of intense level. So I'll go one more click and then you can ask some questions. Then I graduated college and I had started to do triathlons. So I'm a generalist, and it became obvious as I got older. I'm like, oh, I'm bored with one sport. I'm never going to be like the world's best at any one thing. It's just not me. I'm not going to be a great runner. I'm going to be a good runner. I'm not going to be a great cyclist. I'm going to be a good cyclist. I'm not going to be a great swimmer. So I learned how to be good at all three and put them together in a way. And I ended up doing fine. I raced as a pro triathlete for a couple of years in the 80s. Had a blast. And at that time started my career working for Rodale Press, which happened to publish Runner's World, Bicycling, and some other titles. So and I was a science major, so it's totally unqualified for working there, but I found my people. I totally found my people at Rodale. They were sports people. They happened to be more of that run, bike, swim crowd as opposed to basketball or lacrosse or soccer. But those were for sure my people. and I had a great 10-year run there. So, so that's a quick first part of my whole life.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and you said pro triathlete. So, and in the 80s, what did that
Oh,
look like? I mean, getting
no,
sponsors or
oh yeah, yeah. No, good question. First of all, it was literally the first kind of 10 years of triathlon. So it was really early
yeah.
days. I mean, there were no, just to put it in context for your listeners who may race today, wetsuits were not allowed. In fact, we really couldn't. I lived in Pennsylvania. They weren't really
Oh,
available. There was no internet and there were no surfers. So, the people from California and Florida had them, in Texas, but we didn't. And so wetsuits were not allowed. They became legal during my couple of years because it was at a time when it was getting more professional, kind of moving from amateur and hobbyists who just are crazy about what we're doing to professional and prize money and sponsors in the Ironman, et cetera. There was no drafting allowed on bikes. There were very few racers, right? There were a couple hundred people at a race, maybe a big one, a couple thousand. So drafting was not as problematic. But then they started to allow drafting in the bigger races. So there was sort of, you're on your own. And then lastly, the couple of years that I raced, there were a few circuits that were actually really well sponsored by, like Bud Light had a circuit of short course, like intermediate races. There was only one Ironman, like the Ironman. And I was able to participate in both of those at a bunch of regional
wow.
events. And it was an awesome chapter because I learned a bunch more about myself. I pushed some limits, made some great friends along the way. Now I'm in the phase, we're all the same age. Those of us who are still rattling around, we occasionally see each other and we like reminisce about the good old days of when there were no wetsuits, there was no drafting. If you have a flat, you're on your own with a pump and a patch because there were no quick fills. I mean, all of it. And so it's fun. And then I raced what I did. I worked it out. I did what I needed to do. And I retired from that part of racing and career in 91. And then I went on, ran a bunch of marathons and still did a bunch of other fun stuff. But that was kind of my last most competitive phase.
That's awesome. Is there a race that stands out as like, let's do a couple. So like prettiest place that you were,
Oh,
competing and then
yeah.
like the toughest one.
Oh, well, probably the Ironman is both in Hawaii.
True.
I
Okay.
mean, it's pretty spectacular. That course is quite challenging, and some of the other Ironmans that have popped up since then are very difficult courses. But the Hawaii Ironman, I mean, it's the big one. I did it when it was its 10th anniversary. There were a lot of great pros at that time, and I was racing as a pro, but I was working, and so I was really a good age grouper. And I did well, but I was able to race a pro, which made me slightly better and a little faster, I think, or it pulled out the best of me. But I was definitely at the rear of the pro ranks. But it was a blast. I learned a ton from those people. But so prettiest, I would say, and most difficult. I'll tell you a different story, which might be more interesting, at least to me, because it taught me a great lesson.
Sure.
And I think will resonate with any athlete who's out there. And at a time right now, we're in the middle of a pandemic. There's stuff going on, and the word resilience, right? Is a huge part of being an athlete. You got to come back from a loss, whether it's a small loss, a big loss, an injury, a huge life setback, like all of the losses that we experience. So my small story on this is my very first triathlon was in a town in Pennsylvania that I kind of grew up in. I had no idea what I was doing. I had like a bike that was too big. It was a mile swim in a lake that I knew, a 30-mile bike ride on a bike that was a frame size, like too big, with a helmet that I had to borrow, and I wore contact lenses, so I, had to wear glasses, and and then lastly, a 10-mile run, and I had never run 10 miles, ever, at once. So, but I signed up, and I show up, and I'm kind of halfway trained for the thing, and I get through the swim rather. I put my contacts in, which of course is now like, really, that was crazy. Yeah, that's what I did because it's whatever. And then I got on the bike, and about 20 miles in. And I knew I had a flat. Oh. I know how to change flats. I'm well prepared. I have a pump and a patch kit. The valve stem of my tube sheared off. So I literally can't patch my tube. I'm kaput. I'm completely kaput. And I'm in the lead of the race, which I didn't know until some pickup truck came by and said, "Hey, are you okay? Do you need a ride?" I'm like, actually, I do need a ride. I can't get 10 miles down the road. So I put my bike in the pickup, got a ride to the transition. I was like, I'll say some swear words. And I thought, well, I might as well run the 10 miles because I'm here and I want to see if I can do it. So I was a DNF, but I ran the 10 miles. I'm like, okay, I can do that. I didn't officially finish, but I did cross the line and was like, okay, I liked it. I got to do that again. And I will never not finish a race because of a bike problem.
Mm.
So it's just an example. And that was the very beginning of what ended up being, I don't know, 50, 60, I don't know, triathlons. And I never did not finish a race.
Oh, I can't hear you.
I learned how to I learned how to fix a lot of bike problems.
Well, and like I think it's a great lesson of control what you can control, right? You were stopped along the side of the road. You literally had no other option. But yeah, keep going. I love that. I think that's so
Yeah,
important.
and so I just share that because everybody has some example of, the path. Which path did you take? And I didn't throw in the towel. I mean, I was tempted. It was a hot day. I'm like, what? People are like, why did you run the 10 miles? I mean, just all of the little lessons in that. It's just, I think when you're an athlete, you're just like, no, we keep going. We keep going. We find ways to keep going. And that's just an example. So if it helps one person who's listening to your podcast find a way and learn from that lesson, go for it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I would love to hear what you think mentally. I mean, I feel like you've already mentioned a couple things, but sports can play such an important role in shaping who you become. And, whether it's the individual sport, what you can learn from that, the team sport, you can learn from that. What are a couple things that you really feel like as you excelled in your career and you started Oregon Sports Angels, what are some things that you can look back and say, this is because I was involved in sports?
Uh-huh. Well, I have a couple of things. One is I was very fortunate that my parents, especially my dad, not every girl of my age was encouraged to do sports. We were kind of on the cusp of Title IX, and it wasn't as commonplace for people to say, you go, girl. Even still, it's not as equal and democratic as it needs to be. But I was fortunate in that regard and encouraged and actually, encouraged. So that's just something I want to note because not everybody has that. So if you don't have people who are encouraging you and you feel like you want to do something or do more, find people who want you to do it, right? So that's a big a big gift. And there are people who will encourage other people. Like my thing now is help people do their first half marathon or something. It's like that is such
Cool.
an awesome thing. Like, oh, yes, let's figure this out. In terms of some things and skills and other things, I've thought a lot about motivation. We all have different levels of motivation for different things that we do. And there's sort of the intrinsic, what's in you. And then there's the extrinsic, what we get from other people or other energies, et cetera. I have high motivation personally. Again, I don't take that for granted, at least around this topic and working out now. I'm super consistent because I'm highly motivated because A, I like it. And B, I know how it makes me feel good. And then some people are super social. So I think motivation is a good one. And if, depending on what your motivation is and where it comes from, it's just important to note that you need it. We all need it. Sometimes the intrinsic meter is a little low and I'm like, I got to phone a friend because I'm just not feeling like a run today. But my friend was like, let's go. So I think motivation is a big factor because that leads to the real, I believe the real driver of success is as an athlete of any type, whether you're a hobbyist or a professional, a kid or an adult, is habit. And, lots been written about habit, and just for lack of a different sort of thematic word, I'll talk about habit. So if you get the motivation, you can channel that motivation into the habit, whatever that habit is, that habit over time compounds, right? Whether you're individual athlete, team athlete, like the habit of whatever it is. If the habit is doing your core work, which for me right now, I'm in my 50s, I'm like, that's my habit. If I don't do my core work, something blows. So, so you got to create the habit. You have the motivation, the habit, and then people to help you stay on track. And the habits are, are really a good exercise. We just came out of the turn of the year. Thankfully, we're in 2021. Yeah. Thankfully. I would just encourage your listeners, if you haven't already, it's never too late. It's still January. Do a little reconnaissance on, your habits, how you're spending your time, your energy, possibly your money or other, just like what are your habits and what habits are good for you and good for your goals and building up towards your goals. And routines, they turn into routines. Sometimes habit has a bad connotation or can, but good habits are just as powerful and they turn into routines, and those routines will lead to some goals. So I always do that. And the last point there is I'm goal oriented. I have changed my goal orientation over time from a lot of, academic and sports then it was sort of sports and professional, and then it was really professional. And now I'm in this phase where it's a different version of professional and almost philanthropic. So, because that's my progression over time. Luckily, I'm here to be able to do that. But that sort of that sequence, and having goals and reviewing them every year, and then figuring out what habits are going to lead to that momentum that will lead to your success, is something that if you're an athlete and you do it, it just gets ingrained in your DNA. I would turn the tables on you, Ashley, and say, how do you feel about that? Do you have some habits or routines that you found that might be helpful? And then do you do a revisit of your goals every year and kind of put your new life, your annual sort of perspective on things?
Yeah, I actually really geek out at New Year's Eve. Like, I love the look back over a year, and I'm still in the process. I feel like, because like me personally, we just did a week of total redesign of our website. So it's like, okay, now I can reflect again some more. There was just a lot to unpack in 2020, and actually a lot of good in the midst of all the terrible stuff that was happening. So that's why I do it, to try to dig and mine for those things to be thankful for. But actually, yeah, I really do love. I feel like some habits that I wanted to start with this year because of this last week of the website redesign. I was like back in college, staying up till 3 a.m. It was like, oh man, I've got to like re-up on these habits again, because I really want to start a day not looking at my phone. Start a day thinking about what's grateful. Start a day being active. And you're right. Like, especially if you find someone that will hold you accountable, and that's okay to ask a friend. Like, hey, ask me what time I woke up. Ask me, if they're your friend, sure, that's no big deal.
Yep.
And so it is a lot of like, yeah, doing it with other folks, but finding that self-discipline to say, this is on me, really.
Yeah. And I'll add to that, because I'm old school. I still use pen and paper. I'll show you my little notebook here, but we will digress. But I also had the benefit, as I'm sure you and many others, I had some great coaches. I had a couple of lemons. We won't talk about the lemons because I learned lessons from that, but the great coaches, and the one, since we're on this sort of habit and goal and discussion, it happened to be in the triathlon era, which was sort of, I could control how good I could be, right? Like when you're on a team, you can't control the same way. You can control your own, but not the team success. So anyway, I had a high degree of control over my potential. It was kind of like the more I put into it, the more energy and focus I gave to it, the more likely I was going to be to hit or beat my goals, theoretically. Anyway, and I had a great coach, not a sort of a consistent coach, but I went to a couple of events with a guy named Bill Ruth. He and his wife, Sherry Ruth, were pioneers in the triathlon scene back then. And I was lucky because, again, I was working at Runner's World and I was able to go, and I was writing about total fitness and stuff like that. So I was able to go spend literally a 3-day weekend with them at their camp for triathletes. And it was epic. It was like game changing. So I'm like, this is a lesson around learning to ask for help, because I was like self-sufficient and learning from other people, but literally getting coaching was a game changer. And then he ran an exercise for us, which I hadn't been through in that particular way. And it was really very basic, but it was like, imagine the future you see for yourself, write it down, and then one up it. Like, what else could go well? Like, what else could happen? Good. And then he said, and one down it, right? Like, okay, so it's basically a little scenario planning for goals, but it's like, he challenged me to go even more aspirational, because my goal at the time, if I remember correctly ish, was I'm going to go and finish. I was already qualified. I'm like, I'm going to go and finish the Ironman, and I'm going to do it in a certain time. He's like, that's great. Specific, blah, blah, blah. Push it. And I was like, oh God, well, the miracle would have to occur for that to happen. But he planted the seed in my head that I could do that too. And then he said, okay, and what's your baseline, like worst case scenario? Like, where were you? And he's like, well, I'm like, I just finished the thing without getting hurt, and it was a great exercise. And then the last point of the exercise was write it down. The hardest part of the exercise was tell other people. Really hard when you have an aspirational goal, and everyone, I hope, has some person or trusted tribe or posse. Those two personal actions force you to be accountable. So maybe for you, it's like, okay, pick one of the things you just mentioned. Like, I'm not going to start the day on the phone. So put the phone somewhere else.
Yeah.
Is that like out in your car? I mean, I don't know. Put it somewhere where it's just not, it's a hurdle. And then it'll just, and tell people. And then, like you said, somebody's going to try and call you or text you and you're not going to pick up. And they're going to be like, why didn't you pick up? And you're like, because I'm not looking at my phone.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was a good example. Again, I'm a big believer and I still write things down. I still try and challenge myself. I share my goals and commitments with other people and ask them to hold me accountable.
I love
And
that.
I've totally channeled that into Oregon Sports Angels. You know, we're a 3-year-old angel organization. We're a member-based network, so people join on an annual basis. We're all volunteers. It's sort of a nonprofit. So we're doing this because A, we want to. B, it's a lot of fun. And we're experiencing reps in the game of investing in startups. So we're going through this as a team. So our action is very team oriented, even though we contribute as individuals. It's almost like the track and field model. Like OSA is the track and field team, but I'm like a high jumper. My friend is a pole vaulter. Another one's an 800 meter. And we do what we need to do. Like we invest in what we want to do. Like we do our things, but we do them in this context of a team. And so, but we just went through an exercise in December to wrap up our 3rd year. We looked back in the rearview mirror, what worked, what didn't, what do we want to do next year and beyond. And we set a bunch of agreed to team goals, you know, and we wrote them down and there they are. And we'll see how we do in, 6 months, 12 months. So it's just the DNA that I think if you're an athlete, you have, because everything is countable, scorable, quantifiable, we're more likely to be capable and good at, I believe, at setting goals and recording progress against them.
Yeah. And like you said, I think you have to make a plan to when are you going to revisit these?
Yeah, oh, sure.
Like we don't have seasons that we're playing in. And at the end of the season, we can look back. It's like, okay, set a goal and then set a time. When are you going to, revisit?
Yeah. Hey, here's a suggestion on that. Cause it's, to your point, they're very dynamic. I think people get frustrated and give up on things because they're so like artificial deadlines or gates and dates, like January 1st. Okay. So yeah, that's a great excuse to make things happen. So is January 2nd. So is January 31st. So is March 1st. So is June 1st. I mean, whatever.
Yeah.
You can reset the clock every day. Right. And so I encourage people to, people beat themselves up because like, oh, it's January 14th. I haven't done it. I'm done. I'm giving up. You're like, start now.
Yeah.
Just try again, because nobody made the first shot the time I didn't make a free throw for like a million years. So, get to the line and shoot again. Pick your sports metaphor. And that's just channeling that, helping your people get comfortable with it. And then a tip that I learned a long time ago, I had another a professional manager. I've had, again, some 80-20 rule. 80% of my managers and leaders were fabulous. And I've learned so much and I give credit to so many. And I had 20% lemons, probably universal or something, but luckily the 80% were so overwhelmingly positive. Anyway, this one guy, we were talking about like how I was in my mid 90s, I was in a company with very dynamic, very busy, Forrester research. And I was having a hard time shutting anything down on the weekends because there was just so much going. My brain was just revving so hard. And I was like, I just can't. So I'd hit it Monday and I would be like, still engaged from the Friday stuff or whatever. And he taught me a little tip, which was, some people do this when they commute. Now, maybe we're not commuting, but the mental act of, shutting it off on Friday, like recapping your week, like week in review, what got done, what didn't get done, what needs to still get done, and then park it. Like bringing some closure on whatever your work day end of week might be. It might be Friday for you. It might be a Saturday. I don't know, but having some closure and going, okay, that was that week. And then not planning the next week until Sunday.
I love that.
And so Sunday nights, I'm kind of, if you're getting your bags ready to go to school again. Right. So I got pretty skilled in that time frame because I was burning up and burning out there was just no downtime. And I knew it was not good for me. People around me knew my relationship was suffering. It was a bad time. And I was like, I need some help. And he's like, hey, have you tried this? And I was like, oh, it's common sense. And no, I haven't. It took me a while, weeks and weeks and weeks to get in a habit. And now I just automatically, when it's the end of whatever work week I'm on, whatever schedule I'm on, like sometimes it's a day, sometimes it's a week, but there's a mental shift of closure to that week. And that provides the free space for the weekend to refresh myself.
Right.
And I'm not working
so important
time now, but when I was, it was critically important. And then on Sunday night, you kind of get prepared so you're not caught flat-footed on Monday, like, holy crap, I didn't realize I had this and this and this. And I've talked to so many people and sort of had this conversation with people. They're like, oh my God, thank you, because Mondays are crazy. Like, Mondays don't have to be crazy.
Right.
Did a little prep work on Sunday. Again, channeling to some sports things, if you watch the game tape, the video of the team you're about to play, you're not going to be caught by surprise when they show up and do whatever, a scrimmage or a scene that you're not expecting. So it's about preparation and getting ready for game day. And, as an athlete, I'm like, that's easy. Channel that. And game day, if you're working, is Monday, 8 a.m. or whatever. Right. So get ready for game day. And then when the game's over, you watch the film and you debrief and you put it to bed. That's Friday afternoon or Friday night. And then, you watch sports or play sports on the weekend.
I love it. I mean, I think that, my dream is that someone's listening to this who maybe has a corporate job or is, right now, maybe not going to an office. I don't know what, is around the world, but that they're able to make this connection and be like, oh yeah, like this could totally change the way that I view even my job of like, this is manageable. This is exciting. Even I love this. This is so awesome.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad it's not, talking about sports and the games of the minute, but it's more like lessons from being a lifetime athlete and trying to channel them to some, like, how does this help people? Because some of these lessons have really helped me. And, resilience. If I hadn't lost so much in my youth and my high school and college years, I mean, I probably wouldn't have the amount of resilience that definitely helped me power through this last year, because it has not been easy and it's still not easy, but it's like, okay, you got to channel some of that. And that's where a lot of that comes from for me. And then the goal orientation, I think it's a really, without being driven by the goals, but just having, a direction for your life. It could be as simple as what direction are you going? It doesn't have to be a goal of I'm going to, go to grad school or I'm going to make a team or whatever. It could be as vague, as specific as directional, if that makes sense, and imagine yourself in 5 years. Where do you want to be? And like I said, the Ironman story was great because I had imagined that. I watched ABC like years earlier. I'd seen that very famous episode, Julie Moss collapsing. I was like, that was in my head. And I was like, I wonder if I could do that in 5 years. And then no. And then I'm like, I'm going to do that in 5. It became like, you envision it. It's more likely to happen. You write it down. It's more likely to happen. These are all standard operating procedures from the best coaches. But it's very hard to do. And the way you do it is you make it a habit.
Right.
And you do it and you hold yourself and others hold you accountable.
Yeah.
I sound like a broken record.
No, it's awesome. And that sometimes it is that just hearing it, and because it can be so foreign to us, right? We have to learn it. You have to unlearn bad habits to learn good habits a lot of times. So it's all a part of it. Well, yeah, I mean, I've just loved this conversation. I feel like I could talk for hours about this stuff. It's very motivational and very inspiring. Is there anything in particular, like certainly not personal goals you'll have to share, but anything over this year that you are looking forward to or wanting to get out of this new year?
Well, I'm absolutely looking forward to getting the shot and going back to in real life activities with people that I love and miss dearly. I'm an extrovert and I get a lot of energy from people. And this year's been hard. I've been able to, have some energy, but not my usual. So I'm very excited about that. I'll leave politics out of it. I'm excited. I think it's a little nerve wracking, but I'm optimistic. And then, I think the other thing that's been, and it's especially relevant, I worked at Nike for a dozen years. We didn't talk about that, but it's a very cool global brand. It's a business, it has its moments, but in general, so many athletes there's so much diversity in the world of sports. And part of the reason I enjoyed sports as much as I did and still do is that it's accessible to every human on the planet, right? For, abled, not abled, whatever, but every color, every gender, every orientation, like all of us can and do sports. And so I think the older I've gotten, the more I really kind of just think about the worldview, not so much my world, but the worldview, and like, okay, how can we help you? How can we make the world a better place? And I can safely say from my experience, sports has made me a better human. The work that I'm doing now in the context of Oregon Sports Angels is making a small impact in a community that's very, attached to and interested in sports, and because sports makes us better people. So we kind of have that the more we can invest in these people who are founders of companies that are going to help more people do more sports, whatever those sports are, we know that what good can come of that. And then the second related theme is around diversity. So while I was by no means happy with the events of the last couple of years, very, very sad, frustrating, and a huge struggle, I do feel like this is a shift and a movement. And so what I'm looking forward to in 21 is continuing some of the work and some of the movement that we have all, I think a lot of us have done to make the world a better place through more of an equal access, equality lens, however you interpret that. I mean, we can't fix it all at once ourselves, but when you kind of look in the mirror and go, what am I doing today, tomorrow, this week, this month, this year? And forcing yourself to answer the question, like, I'm hiring a person who doesn't look like me. I'm going to pay equal, offer equal pay to anyone for whatever they're doing. I'm going to have a more diverse pipeline of whatever it is that I do, whether it's, in my case, it's founders and their companies. It takes more work. Guess what? I'm happy to do that work because those people are out there and they deserve our attention. So I feel like I'm optimistic about and look forward to sports, and because of the diversity of the activities, the people and the humans participating and the access, we can make a small difference. And, just being open for business, approachable to anyone, wherever they're coming from, is a huge crusade for me. And I think our people, and, so we add members, our members like signing up for that. We have about 35 members. We'll probably be at 40 or 45 soon. Every one of us can be a little ripple in that pond, and every one of us can bring some more people along, and eventually start to change a little bit of the way that our part of the world works.
I love that. Gosh, so good. So centered and grounded and like you said, in making a difference. So we certainly wish you the best of luck in that, and would love to follow along. Where can people find you and connect or follow Oregon Sports Angels?
Oh, good question. Easy. We have a website, www.oregonsportsangels.org. And you can also find us on LinkedIn, and you can find us on Twitter. We're pretty lame on Twitter, but we find a lot of founders and a lot of prospective members have found us through the website, and our LinkedIn action is very fun. We have some amazing, talented marketing people, and we love sports, and it comes out in our player cards and our stuff that we're doing. So if people are interested, they can find us there. And if somebody's heard this and wants to reach out to me directly, you can do it through the website. I usually still see a lot of almost all the emails. So someone can find me that way as well. Awesome. Well, thanks again for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate your time. You're so welcome. Happy